See, we're on a rotation here with this greetings thing because there's 1 week where it feels good. This week, pulled up lame on that one too. I could have done it a little bit longer in terms of the wind I had, but just the throat, got to protect the throat. Got to, do what we can there to protect the voice in going forward with this here program and with anything else I might want to do with my voice in the future, I guess, there as well. How you doing, folks? Welcome. Come on in and turn it up. It's the Weekly Trim with yours beardly, the one and only Redbeard. Or at least the only guy who calls himself Redbeard for the next 10 square miles or so. Appreciate you guys for tuning in and being a part of the podcast here on the Rasslin with Redbeard YouTube channel, or potentially on Anchor.fm or several other hosting platforms that we're now a part of. Thanks to Anchor.fm for hosting us and for spreading it around and for getting us on all kinds of different places. I think we're on Spotify. We're on, what's that thing? Google Podcasts, maybe one or two others. Not sure if we're on iTunes or not, but hey, if it's going to be spread around, then we're happy to have it around there. Because, as we said before, we know that a lot of people do enjoy the YouTube channel. We're glad that you're here participating with it. Although we know that a lot of people just prefer a audio-only opportunity to listen to something like this. So, if you're on Anchor.fm, we appreciate you. If you're on YouTube, please contribute to the channel by, in some way, shape, or form, leaving a like or comment or subscribe. All that fun stuff that us as YouTubers are supposed to beg you for. This is the August 31st, 2020 edition of the program. And if you guys have been at all consistent listeners here since I got back going with this program here about a month or so ago, I've been jovial in my build to talking about, various things that have been going crazy as a part of 2020, and just, talking about all the crazy stuff that we've encountered one way, shape, or another. And, it's for the most part been stuff that we can talk about and have a pretty lighthearted tone and engaging in conversation about. Because we talked about the earthquake and how it didn't really do anything in this area. And then we were talking about hurricanes and how they kind of, I think they did some damage, but not in this part of the world. We had, one come up between Louisiana and Texas here, but again, not something that we were really concerned about. We didn't get any rain or anything off of it. Now there are apparently 3 or 4 systems pushing their way from the coast of Africa up here to where we are. Whether or not they'll amount to anything, we don't know yet, but we'll see what happens with that in the next week or so. But something happened here in the past couple of days that it felt like a kick in the gut, to be honest, because it was not something that we were in any way prepared for or anticipating, but it nonetheless happened, and it's probably, I'll go ahead and say this is one of the more painful things that, to really come across in terms of stuff that's happened in 2020. And it's not, I'll say it's painful, but I'm going to go ahead and say we're talking about the untimely passing of actor Chadwick Boseman. It's really it's remarkable in how someone like me, I'll go ahead and admit, has never really been hugely impacted by the death of a celebrity. And, I won't say that I've spent hours weeping over the death of Chadwick. However, I will say that his passing really has hit home. in a lot of ways, and it's really something that has just sort of set me into a mood of not being just able to put much of a smile on my face the past couple days, and I can't really. I can't really get into the episode here today with that jovial lightheartedness because this is something that's still on my mind. I hope to still have some fun with this episode, but in dealing with this, it's something that I mentioned there a moment ago. It really does hit home. And it's not just because of the fact that Chadwick was born here in South Carolina. Not a lot of people realize that based on the fact that, he's a A-list celebrity and whatnot. He had to come from somewhere out west or whatnot. Nope, born right here in South Carolina. I believe over towards Anderson, if I'm not mistaken. But he was born and raised here. Star athlete, as you might not be surprised. Went on to have a great career for a number of different reasons, not just the Marvel movies in terms of his portrayal of Black Panther and King T'Challa there. It's one of these things where it's remarkable the more you learn about it, because from all intents and purposes, the reports that we've seen have they've confirmed that he dealt with this from as long ago as 2016. And, that's a good 4-year protracted battle with this thing. Given that he was diagnosed with stage 3, that's a pretty advanced diagnosis there, I'll go ahead and say. But given the fact that he continued to work, not only, in filming both of the Avengers films there, but also numerous other films that he had, which had a tremendous impact on Hollywood as a whole in terms of him being viewed as, I think a lot of people had him in mind as being a potential for sort of the throne of Denzel Washington almost. He was one of the guys. It was sort of him, Idris Elba, and a couple others who were in that ballpark as being sort of the next big A-list African-American actor. I'll say, I hate to quantify it as such because it should just be that he was a great actor, not just an African-American actor. But, he was going to be one of the guys, I feel like, especially after the portrayal of Jackie Robinson in 42. That was a great, great performance of his. And, of course, his work as Black Panther was tremendous as well. In making a comparison between movies, people have drawn comparisons between Captain America, Civil War, and The Empire Strikes Back in terms of those two films being the shift that really put things into more of a darker, more somber, serious tone for both of the universes that they're a part of. And it's really probably no surprise that Black Panther made his appearance in that movie, because it really, it's an amazing piece there that bridges the gap between when the Marvel Universe was this bright, shiny sort of, hey, we all get along in the Avengers, to where it was like, we don't really like each other that much because we're diametrically opposed on so many different levels. And, the contributions that he made to that film, and of course to Black Panther and to the Avengers Endgame films there, amazing stuff. He was an incredible actor, incredible person as well, because despite his diagnosis, as we mentioned there a moment ago, this was in 2016 when he found out that he had this stage 3 colon cancer diagnosis. He continued to work, but he also continued to visit with Make-A-Wish kids and with people who wanted to be a part of his life, to sort of be inspired by him. And that's an incredible thing. To do all that he did in terms of taking treatment, surgeries, and have done it silently. And this is another thing. That's because somebody on my Facebook timeline shared the fact that everybody in his circle kept it quiet for 4 years because nobody knew. I didn't know. I don't think anybody had any idea that the man was suffering from colon cancer. I would, it's one of those deals where it's kind of a jealousy kind of thing, to where you wish you had known in a way, because I'm one of those people who believes in the power of prayer and of good vibes and positive energy and all that stuff. So you would have loved to have been able to, pray for the man, or in some way, shape, or form have sent that energy to his spirit and body. But, at the same time, I respect the hell out of the fact that he didn't want anybody to know he was suffering or that he was fighting this battle. And the fact that all of his relatives, crew, whatever you want to call them, didn't say a word, never let one peep out about the fact that he was going through this. It's amazing. Because, most people in Hollywood and whatnot, if they have something like this going on, it's on the news the day of their diagnosis because they want that level of extra attention in some way, shape, or form. Chadwick, apparently, he was strong enough to, I shouldn't say suffer, but he was strong enough to fight and to do what he knew he had to do in spite of it all. I think he probably had some idea of what his prognosis was. I knew he probably knew he had to fight, but he probably knew that with that advanced stage of colon cancer, it's tough. And it really is an amazing thing to consider that he did all that he did, despite the fact that his body was being ravaged by that terrible disease known as cancer. And this is where, I have to pay ultimate respect to the man because, we mentioned a moment ago about him being a top-notch African-American actor. He should be known as a top-notch actor, period. There have been several things that have been sort of, pointed out and whatnot. The fact that he has done so much for black children and whatnot who can now say, I have a superhero who looks like me. They don't have to, wonder about, why are they all like Captain America? Why is it Wolverine? Why are all these, white-skinned heroes? Why do I not have one who looks like me? But now they do. And I've read several stories of, him talking to people and using the Wakanda Forever greeting and whatnot with the crossed arms across the chest to have that bond with people and to say, hey, guess what? I'm your guy. I will be your hero. And it's just a huge, huge, huge thing that he did in inspiring so many children. Not just the Make-A-Wish kids. I'm talking about children, period. White kids, black kids combined. Just to say, hey, this is possible. You have a incredible role model in his performance, not only as Black Panther, but as a number of other, characters and personas that he had out there. We mentioned the Jackie Robinson thing there, but his performance as James Brown there as well. It's great stuff all the way around in terms of his career. And it's very sad that he's gone. I wish that there could have been one appropriate or one proper send-off for him in some way, shape, or form, because when it started rolling out on my Facebook timeline and on Twitter and whatnot that his death had been reported, it was like, what? This has got to be a typo or something like that. He can't actually be dead. No, this isn't true. And then you see more of it, and then it's coming from sources like Variety and Forbes and other magazines and resources that are, of course, known for checking their resources and checking behind themselves and whatnot. And it was just, again, a total kick in the gut. And I really, I'm to a point where I'm sad for his family and friends and all the people who knew him and were impacted by him. But it really hits home for me because I have a relative who also passed away as a result of colon cancer. My grandfather. He's been deceased now for at least 20 years. I think I was, how old was I? Maybe 12 when my grandfather passed away. It was, a terrible thing to watch because I'm going to get into some personal stuff here. So if you don't really want to hear me talk about my upbringing and whatnot, just go ahead and skip to the next segment or whatnot. But I feel like this is appropriate or an appropriate time to bring this out. But when I was a kid, I grew up with my mom, my grandmother, and grandfather in the same house. My parents got divorced when I was very young, so never really had a relationship with my father. And it was the four of us there in one big house. And, my grandfather was pretty much the only father figure I had growing up. My uncle was more of a big brother type. He was always there to, sort of show me the ropes and to, have fun with and whatnot. But my grandfather was really the only father figure I had growing up. And for 10 years there or so, he was the biggest, strongest man I'd ever seen. And then suddenly, one day, I remember him talking about having pain in his abdomen. And it just went downhill from there in terms of his prognosis and his diagnosis of having colon cancer. I don't know that my parents ever really said, Robert, Grandpa's got cancer. I don't think they ever really sat me down and explained to me what he had. But, you learn things as a kid that comes secondhand a lot of times because your parents or adults think you can't handle it or whatever. But, I learned about what was going on there. I learned a lot about the treatment that goes into something like that. The hours, seemingly days, spent sitting in a hospital watching him take his treatment and being in a bed there with a tube in his nose and having an ostomy bag. It was just a terrible thing to watch because, again, he was the strongest person I had ever known up to that point. And then for that 2 or 3 years there where he went back and forth in having, various surgeries and all this stuff that he endured there, it was very painful. And I could not imagine seeing another family endure that same thing. Of course, it's something that sets on me because after his diagnosis and my mom having had breast cancer, it's like, okay, well, I guess, the time's going to come whenever my cancer, I hate to say it, but whenever my particular variety shows up, it's going to be something apparently. Because it seems to be, genetic in my family. I will admit to not having had a colon cancer screening yet. I don't know that I just turned 40. I don't know that I'm at the age really to have that done, but maybe I need to look into it. It might not be a bad idea at this point in time. Although Lord knows I've got enough health issues seemingly going on as it is right now. I don't need one more to be tacked on to things. But, again, in talking about Chadwick and his impact on everything around us seemingly, really could not be prouder of the fact that Governor McMaster, who's our governor here in South Carolina, chose to have the flags lowered to half-staff in his memory. I thought that was a very touching tribute to him. Some people I've seen on online articles complaining about, oh, well, there were people who were more poignant that could have had that tribute given to them. You can go ahead and F you. Just sit on it and rotate. And I know there are plenty of people who've passed away that have had an impact on, the state and everything else. But really and truly, I feel like that was an appropriate measure to say, hey, we respect and we appreciate this man, especially given the social justice opportunities that are happening around us in the world at this point in time. It was the right thing to do, and it was a very noble tribute. So you have to give credit where credit is due to Governor McMaster for doing that. But just in our own personal way, Chadwick, rest in power. It's certainly gone too soon, gone too early. 43 years old. That's the real kicker there as well. Just turned 40 myself. And he was only 3 years older than me. Yep. So, hate to start on a down note there with things, folks, but it really was something that was on my heart and on my mind, and I felt like it was very appropriate to lead in this week with a tribute of sorts to a fallen member of the world around us who had a tremendous impact on the world around us, and that being Chadwick Boseman. We'll take a break here, folks. We'll listen to some music, and we'll come back and see what we can do to jazz things up a bit. Stay tuned. Hey. What's going on, guys? Appreciate you continuing to hang out with us and enjoy some tunes there as we get into talking about some wrestling. I've said before I didn't really want to put a whole lot of wrestling on this show because I wanted to do other things that were more wrestling-centric with the channel and with, things that I've been involved with. But the past 2 weekends, it's something you could not avoid because, last weekend we had SummerSlam. This weekend we have WWE's Payback. Would have been nice to have had another sort of dual threat thing going on there where you had an AEW program, NXT, and a WWE. Well, let me rephrase. You have sort of a dual threat with WWE products with NXT and the main WWE roster. But then also it would have been cool to have an AEW show as well, but AEW was on Thursday night this past week. But still, a lot of wrestling going on, a whole lot of cool stuff happening. And it's just, it's poignant that we talk about this at this point in time because of all that's going on. So let's, for starters here and get into this segment, we'll take a look at the SummerSlam card for a moment. And, it's one of these things where it always seems like people are going to be split down the middle almost anymore in terms of what they think of these WWE pay-per-views, if you want to even call them that. I guess, would it be network specials? Is that what they're really referred to as? I'm still going to call them a pay-per-view until the end of time because, I always think of it being a pay-per-view. Back in the day, you had to plunk down your $30 or how much ever it was for a show. And you got to watch there with your buddies and whatnot. If you were able to get a crew together, okay, instead of $30, you might have paid $5, whatever. But it worked out pretty well. And I'm going to always continue to call these things pay-per-views or network specials, if the vernacular really changes, but whatever. And looking at the card, you had sort of some, I won't say some throwaway matches, but, when you look at the United States title picture right now, you've got MVP with his crew there of Bobby Lashley and Shelton Benjamin and taking on Apollo Crews for the United States Championship. I kind of see that at some point turning to where MVP or someone in that crew does get the United States Championship, but at that point, I think that's going to be sort of the death knell for Crews in being a part of the WWE roster. I think that's when things will start to turn sour for him. I just have that feeling about things. One of the real treats for me on this card were the two women's matches involving Asuka. She took on not only Bayley but also Sasha Banks. Didn't win over Bayley, but she did win the Raw Women's Championship by defeating Sasha Banks. So you had, Banks and Bayley there who had both the Women's Tag Team Championship and also both of the Women's Singles Championships from Raw and SmackDown. Of course, now Asuka has defeated Sasha Banks, so she's got the Women's Raw Championship. And that was a good thing because, you really don't need to keep those belts on those ladies forever, even though it was sort of becoming a two-woman power trip. The reference to the old Triple H Stone Cold tag team to where you had those two guys who were really terrorizing everything for a couple of months there until, I think, was it Triple H who got hurt at that point in time? I don't remember, but one of the other of them got hurt, and it wound up sort of putting a kibosh on the whole thing. But those were some really great matches, and it just shows how the upper echelon of the women's division in WWE continues to be just top notch. So those two ladies, or those, I should say, three ladies, had some tremendous performances, and definitely kudos to them. The WWE Raw Tag Team Championship match was sort of a train wreck. The Street Profits and Andrade and Angel Garza, they put on some entertaining matches, definitely for sure. But it's one of those things where it's craziness. It's 100 miles per hour in every direction almost. So it's fun to watch, but not a whole lot really there in terms of any real substance. I'm not going to mention Mandy Rose and Sonya Deville because that was pretty much as expected. I don't think anybody thought that Mandy Rose was leaving WWE. Sonya Deville, of course, she's now kayfabe out of the company. Hey, does she come back as something else, someone else? I don't know. It's one of those things where it's going to be, a couple of months or a couple of weeks where she takes some time off. Of course, the unfortunate thing with her was some dude tried to I don't know if he was trying to kidnap her or what, but some dude tried to break into her house. What? No, don't be that level of asshole. My God. But really and truly, just, it was terrible, terrible story. But for it to have happened around the same time as her being booted from the company, storyline was kind of ironic there. But at any rate, the next one that was really, I'd say, kind of crazy and how it broke down was the combination of talent that was around this match. It was a street fight between Seth Rollins and Dominic Mysterio, who is, of course, Rey Mysterio's legitimate son. He's a foot taller than Rey, but he's still his son. I think Dominic might be taller than both of his parents, which is it's kind of one of those things where, where did you get the genetics for this from? But at any rate, the kid, he's got some talent. He's got some ability, and it's really something to see the work that he's done to prepare himself to potentially have a career as a professional wrestler. He and Seth Rollins, Rollins is one of those guys who you can put out there and just tell him, all right, go 100 miles per hour, and he'll look like an absolute car crash because that's what he's good at. And he's a talented wrestler, period, but he has that ability to just make himself into this maniacal thing and not be at all afraid of taking whatever kind of impacts and bumps you ask him to. So he's really something else, and the two of them had a great match for what it was. It wasn't the cleanest match in the world in terms of, the whole thing going off without a hitch. Dominic, of course, is still very young. He's had all of 2 or 3 matches now in his career period. So it's just, it's good to have him coming up through the company. I can only say there are probably 100 guys in the locker room at NXT who are like, kid, you don't know how lucky you are to have what you've got right now. But, at the same time, he's apparently got the will and got the genetics for it. So if he keeps working and keeps getting better, who knows? Sky's the limit for him. The match I really enjoyed on this card was Drew McIntyre and Randy Orton. They beat the tar out of each other. I was really impressed with the way they put things together and just really showed how much that WWE Championship means to both of them. Of course, McIntyre did retain, but it was a very hard-fought match. It didn't really seem like it was in favor of one or the other in the way things were laid out there for the most part. So it had you guessing, which is good because you never want to come into a match like this thinking, oh, well, this is where they're going. But the whole thing there was top-notch, I thought. The last thing there was, of course, the main event. I shouldn't say the last thing. Was the Falls Count Anywhere match for the WWE Universal Championship between The Fiend and Braun Strowman. This was, you put these two out there and they're going to have their more or less violent Mick Foley style match where it's involving planes, trains, and automobiles, more or less. So, it is what it is. And The Fiend did wind up winning the WWE Universal Championship. Where do they go from there with these two? I'm not real sure because Strowman, it's one of those things where you think, okay, well, do we have an idea of what he's going to be doing later on? And we don't really, because the whole thing there is, is he successful in this sort of turn that they were doing for him and The Fiend at the same time? But it seemed as though they wanted to put The Fiend in a position where the fans might like him for some reason. So, not real sure there, but, it's going to lead into where we are now, which is, of course, the Payback pay-per-view. A week later, we had SummerSlam, now we have Payback. One of those kind of weird moments in the year where it seems like WWE is content to get as much in as they can in terms of their material by shoving as much out there as they can. So we have, 2 shows in very short order, produced a lot of content this week in terms of the whole shooting match there with what WWE has done between NXT's TakeOver, the pay-per-view last week, SummerSlam, Raw, SmackDown, and also NXT there in the middle again, had another NXT program, plus now this pay-per-view again, Payback. It's really crazy to think the stuff that goes into them being able to run the level of shows that they do. But, here we are. Here we're going back into another pay-per-view here. This one, I'll say historically, Payback has been kind of a throwaway, and I'm not sure there's going to be that much happening here with this program, but we'll see what happens. We'll sort of run down the card here. There's a couple that are very interesting, and there's a couple that are to me just going to be kind of it is what it is. You got the Riot Squad and the Iconics. I feel like this one probably could be or should be on the pre-show. There's just not a whole lot there. You got the sort of reformed Riot Squad between Ruby Riott and Liv Morgan taking on the Iconics of Billie Kay and Peyton Royce. It's going to be what it is. Ladies tag team match. Probably going to set whoever is, I'd say, the winner here to maybe go on to challenge whoever wins the match between Bayley and Sasha Banks and Shayna Baszler and Nia Jax for the WWE Women's Tag Team Championship. That would be sort of a natural progression to me. That match there between Bayley and Banks and Baszler and Jax, that's a mouthful. Try saying that 3 times fast. That one, again, I feel like the ultimate point here is to drive the wedge between Bayley and Banks. I think that's the ultimate point here. If we see them drop those belts here, I'd say that is going to be the big thing going forward, probably for a couple of months, even maybe all the way up through WrestleMania of next year. Who knows? It's one of those things where a feud of theirs can continue to build and continue to go back and forth depending on how they want to push things. And they do have a lot of chemistry together. So we'll have to see where that goes. But it could be an interesting setup for what's coming next in terms of the women's tag team division. Now, I mentioned a moment ago that you have this sort of back and forth over the United States Championship between Apollo Crews and members of MVP's crew there. I can't remember the name of their faction, unfortunately, but whatever the case may be, Bobby Lashley this time is getting the opportunity against Apollo Crews. Again, if Apollo Crews loses to one of these guys, I feel like that's pretty much it for him. And I know that's a terrible thing to say, but I just don't feel like he's got long for the company if he is not carrying that title. So we'll have to see what happens here. I would say more likely that Lashley or MVP would be the ones to hold that belt. I think Shelton Benjamin might have the 24/7 title right now. So I wouldn't think they'd give him 2 titles at the same time, especially when one of them is sort of the, I'll say, comedy active part of the routine there anyway, when you have ninjas and whatnot that are aiming for the 24/7 title. But we'll see where that goes as well. The story continues between the Mysterio clan and Seth Rollins and Murphy. I think that'll be a fun match there. It doesn't have any stipulation tied to it, so it's not going to be, a train wreck where they're trying to gouge each other's eyeballs out again. This is just a straight tag team match between Dominic and his dad, Ray, and Seth Rollins and Murphy. So I think it'll be interesting. Might not have a whole lot to it in terms of being what we've seen before, but it still could be interesting. 2 more that I'm not real sure how much involvement they really are going to have and how much impact with the whole thing here. You got Matt Riddle taking on King Corbin. That's kind of, I'd say, a setup towards something relating to maybe an Intercontinental run for one of those 2 guys. Matt Riddle, maybe. He's really an impressive specimen to me. But King Corbin, I could take or leave it with him. He's good in terms of making people hate him. I will give him that. But in terms of him and his wrestling prowess, it is what it is there. But, the next one that I mentioned is being kind of an outlier almost. Big E versus Sheamus. With Big E on his singles run at this point in time, I feel like he's either got to be on a consistent winning streak and get to a point where he's either challenging for the Intercontinental title or potentially the Universal title. Otherwise, he's just kind of in treading water mode. And I don't think that putting him out there with Sheamus is a bad thing. I think they'll have a good match. But again, it's one of those deals to where, all right, he's got to continue to have momentum, otherwise he has no point. So we'll see what happens there as well. The two big matches on the card here are, of course, Keith Lee versus Randy Orton, and one that we'll mention here in a moment from now. But I want to talk about the Keith Lee versus Randy Orton match here. The lead into this, of course, was Keith Lee losing the NXT Championship to Karrion Kross at NXT TakeOver. Kross winds up being severely injured in the form of a separated shoulder and had to drop that title. So now there's going to be a four-way on an upcoming NXT program to decide the new champion there. Keith Lee then comes over to Raw, and people were like, well, what is he wearing? And why did he change his beard? Because immediately when he gets to Raw, he'd been on NXT, he had been wearing similar gear to what he had worn on the Independents, which was a sort of like biker shorts combo with his boots and whatnot. And when he gets to Raw, suddenly he's wearing not a singlet, but it's like a tank top style compression shirt and what appeared to be a mini skirt. I'm sorry, what? I don't get that at all. And again, it's one of these things where someone just really hit it out of the park in creating this cartoon that was on one of the wrestling sites that I follow, where they had Vince, in cartoon form, of course, saying, "Oh, he's fat, cover him up," and sending him out there wearing this just ridiculous outfit that he had on. So I'm not sure what happened there. If it was, I'm sure it was Vince's idea to send him out there wearing what he was wearing, but at the same time, it was just like, what in the world has he got on? So again, I'm not sure where they're going to go with the two of them feuding. They've had some good matches, they've had some good interactions, but I feel like, again, if you're going to put Keith Lee out there immediately like that, you've got to give him some pretty major comeuppance in terms of him being seen as a legitimate powerhouse. I don't know that Randy Orton was the best one to maybe put him out there with, because Orton, he's where he's at right now. He went from, of course, challenging for the WWE Championship to now fighting a guy who just a couple of weeks ago was on the second tier of the roster. So whatever. It's just that's the way my mind thinks when it comes to the way this stuff should be arranged. And the main event I'll say this match got interesting, but only within the past couple of days did it get interesting, because you had The Fiend taking on Braun Strowman, taking on Roman Reigns in a no-holds-barred triple threat match. Why did it become interesting over the past couple of days? Well, Roman Reigns, of course, returned here at the end of the SummerSlam pay-per-view, and yet that wasn't the most interesting thing. This past episode of SmackDown, this past Friday, suddenly you have Roman Reigns conspiring with Paul Heyman. And he's apparently a Paul Heyman guy now, which is a great thing, because if for years they've tried to make Roman Reigns a villain. They wanted people to boo Roman Reigns. Well, I think this is the best chance they've had at it in terms of putting him with somebody who can make people legitimately hate them, in terms of Paul Heyman being a mouthpiece for him. Because that's the one shortcoming that Roman has had forever, is that they've put him out there and they've wanted him to get over himself. But now with Heyman being a mouthpiece for him, potentially, he can do the stuff in the ring and be an excellent wrestler, but not have to worry about having the mouthpiece side of things, which is what Heyman can really excel at and put him to the next level at. I want to say that this will work, but at the same time, this could be one of those deals to where people say, "Oh, this is finally what we wanted. We wanted Roman to be bad. Now we can cheer for him." What? Oh, God. I hate wrestling fans sometimes. Because it's like, you put all this effort creatively into concocting what should be a hero versus villain storyline, and then you wind up cheering for the villain. What in the world? Come on, y'all. This is supposed to be straightforward, and you guys are all wanting to cheer for the Joker as he fillets Robin. I mean, come on. So, again, it'd be interesting to see where these matches go here this evening. with the Payback pay-per-view. I know I'm recording this, to a point to where you'll be hearing this after the fact and all the results will already be out there, but it's interesting to talk about these shows and to say, hey, this is what we thought was going to be happening there. Maybe totally wrong, maybe right somewhat, but we're probably going to be totally wrong. At any rate, something else I had to talk about in regard to WWE's product currently is the WWE ThunderDome concept. Oh, wow. This is hard to get into because ThunderDome, from a technical standpoint, is a absolutely marvelous thing. It's incredible what they've put out there in terms of the lights, the showmanship aspect of it, the pyro, smoke, all that stuff's out there. And, it's really cool in terms of what they've done in trying to incorporate a live audience. But that's where the trouble comes in. There are two things that people have already picked up on. One is the fact that the audio they're using in the shows these days is straight from the WWE video games. There's an episode of Botchamania that I hate to use Botchamania as a source here, but Botchamania, if you're not familiar, go check them out on YouTube. They're out there. Tremendous series. I actually am in the episode of Botchamania. Briefly, there was a show long ago that was a UWF live show, which UWF was the company that Hermie Sadler ran, and he was trying to do TNA house shows. It was a fun concept, fun show that I was at when I wound up being on camera. But this was, an opportunity to say, hey, I was in a Botchamania episode, not for having a botch, just in the background because I was in the front row at this particular show. But at any rate, there's an episode of Botchamania that's fresh out there right now where they show some of the trolls that have gotten through all the layers of security that WWE has for the ThunderDome concept in terms of the live audience there. You had a guy who put up, instead of like his image or his video or whatever, he put up a picture of Chris Benoit. You had another guy who got just a block of text that said "Fire Velveteen Dream," which I will admit I didn't understand what that was about until I went online and read the fact that Velveteen Dream apparently has sent pictures of his Velveteen Dream Jr. to kids online or to people who were underage. I had no idea whatsoever that had taken place or that he was accused of that. But, here we are. Then you had someone else who put up a picture of some Klansmen, actual KKK members. And probably the worst one, or definitely the worst one, somebody snuck in a video of a beheading, like one of the terrorist groups beheading someone. I don't know how in the hell that got through. But, because it's my understanding that they have some form of censor that goes into checking all these things and that there apparently are actual humans involved in taking all this stuff in and sort of making sure that it's not gross or obscene or in some way, shape, or form, inappropriate for broadcast. Because another thing that I had read up on this whole process is that they had apparently told the people who were signing up for this program that if you do anything that is considered a violation of FCC regulations, we're passing on those fines to you. We will not be responsible for these things. So, again, it's one of those deals where you have to wonder, okay, well, with all this going on and with all this that you've got tied into it, do I really want to participate in this as a fan? Because in my mind, I'm thinking, well, if I do anything that is even halfway goofy, they're going to potentially find a way to put me before an FCC board and say, hey, well, you got to pay X number of $1,000. No, I didn't do that. That was some other turd over there. But, as a concept, ThunderDome is great. Is it paying off in terms of what they really want people to be doing? I don't know. It looks cool, but I think AEW has an advantage over them because they actually have fans returning to their shows now and having their own arena, more or less. It's helped tremendously. It's very ironic, of course, that all this whole battleground is Florida, the state of Florida, between Jacksonville and Orlando. That hour and a half drive between one and the other. You've got this battle going back and forth between these two companies. And it's very interesting in that regard. But, at the same time, I like Thunderdome as a concept. I think it's very dangerous going forward in terms of what they can do with this. So we'll have to see how things roll on here and if they decide to maintain this for any real length of time and for what they want to do in terms of getting fans back in these arenas. I think that it's gonna come by hook or by crook, one way or another. And it's just a matter of when at this point in time, because people are getting sick and tired of being stuck at home and being told, well, you can't go out to the movies, you can't go out to this, that, and the other, you might get sick. I really and truly, it feels to me like people, at least in my part of the world, are starting to say, you know what, if I get sick, I get sick. I'm just sick and tired of having to be told that we can't live the way we were before. And, consequently, we're about to be where football season would be kicking off. And, people in this part of the world, they want their football. They want to be able to go out and sit under those Friday night lights or on, tailgate on Saturdays. And if you tell them they can't, then you're going to have a major problem. So we'll just have to see where things go there and also where things go with the Thunderdome concept as well. But I think it's interesting. I think it's got more challenges than what they were probably really encountering there or counting on as well. So we'll see what happens. Cool stuff in terms of technology, but dangerous all the same. Folks, we'll take a break. Be back here in a few to talk about something that I am just plain sick and tired of, and that is the heat. Be back in a few, folks. Stay tuned. Welcome back, folks. Thank you for continuing to hang out with us here on the Rasslin with Redbeard YouTube channel and tuning into the Weekly Trim podcast. As we said before earlier in the program, if you are not already, please do consider subscribing to what we're doing here on the YouTube channel. Got all kinds of interesting content out there, whether it be wrestling matches, content reviews, podcasts, my old vlog I used to do, which I do intend to getting back to the vlog. Especially once people start running shows again, I want to do comparisons between the way things were and the way they are now, because we've got some pretty heavy indication that shows will be starting back with a consistent schedule starting next month, which we're almost into September now. But I think starting in September, you're going to see shows not only running consistently, but also running pretty hardcore there as well, with their very frequent nature, though. So we'll have to see what happens there. But really cool stuff on the channel. Appreciate you tuning in to this show, but also want to make sure you have an opportunity to check out all the other stuff we got there as well. Now, having said that, I have to say, if you're not aware, I live down here in South Carolina, in the Midlands of South Carolina. We're on about the same longitude as Atlanta in terms of, where we sit in terms of our relevance to the sun and whatnot. So Columbia here a couple of years ago, might have even been a decade ago, came out with this marketing slogan, if you want to call it that they were famously hot. Columbia's famously hot. Why would you ever want to come somewhere that is named after the fact that it is balls sweaty hot for better than 3/4 of the year? I'll go ahead and say. Or at least it feels that way to me. And I've lived in South Carolina my entire life. I've lived in different parts of the state, but I've really only lived in South Carolina. And it is amazing to me that it continues to seemingly get hotter and hotter and more humidity. And I hear these people who want to argue, global warming and climate change isn't a thing. Hey, I think you're barking up the wrong tree there, brother. Because to me, the way it feels now is as hot as it ever has been. Now, I will say this summer has not been as hot as I think this summer's past. We've not had that many 100+ days this year. Why that is, I have no idea. I'm sure there's some science behind it, but it doesn't seem like we've had that many 100+ days this year. Still been plenty hot because of the fact that we have tremendous humidity. This year has been unique in that the humidity has been very, very high all the time. And I think that is reflective in the storm patterns we've had and in just the general activity with the hurricane season as a whole here. Because, of course, those things are fed by humidity and by all the moisture that's in the atmosphere. So this year has been very uncomfortable for me. I will admit to, I've got various issues in terms of my health, this, that, and the other. But I always used to hear my grandmother talking about how, her knees would start bothering her, or some part of her body would begin aching by virtue of the way the weather was changing. And I always thought, well, that's bullshit. No, she's not actually doing that. She's just pulling my finger. And now that I'm older and seemingly inherited the barometer aspect of, okay, well, this is what is going on in the atmosphere in terms of my body being able to sense it. It's like, I didn't want this. No, I don't want to have a knee that goes sideways when it starts to get ultra humid outside, or having another knee that swells up when it gets really humid outside, or, ankles that bother me and this, that, and the other. It's terrible. Because you'd think, okay, well, it's just going to be hot. No, if the humidity's there, it screws with so many parts of my physiology. It's terrible to even think of. But at the same time, it is what it is. I get a fresh bottle of ibuprofen just about every week. Well, not every week, but about once a month for sure. Because it's you have to have something to help with the inflammation and the pain. Otherwise, you're just going to be tied up in knots and not able to get around. And that's a big part of why I can't stand the heat either is that it limits my mobility so much. Not that I'm in that great of a shape to begin with, but in terms of not being able to use your knees and your ankles and even my shoulders down, my shoulders have started to bother me. And saying, okay, well, we can do this, that, and the other. Nope, not really. You got some aches and pains you got to deal with there first. And it's like, oh, God, why did I get old? Why did I ever get to 40? And you just wondered, like, well, if this is how I feel at 40, what's it going to be like when I get to 60 or 70 or, Lord willing, 80? Do I even want to be able to, or will I even be able to move around at that point in time? Probably not. I'll probably be in a chair for the majority of the time if I even get to that point in my life. But, it really is crazy to think of all the heat and all the sweat and everything else that I do. I know I'm not the only one who sweats, but, when I talk about the heat, I always am reminded of a movie, which I don't know how many people remember this movie, because it's pretty old, but it was not a huge, I'll say, success. It was something that I think some people were aware of and whatnot, but it's kind of a war movie. It's set around, I want to say it's between World War II and Korea. I could be totally wrong there, so forgive me if I am, but the name of the movie was Biloxi Blues, starring Matthew Broderick. Of course, Matthew Broderick, he's not exactly a household name these days anymore either, but he was a very young man in this role. He was a squad member of a fresh batch of Marines, going to be going through the hell that is basic training, or at least that was at that point in time. But there's a part of the movie there where he's fresh to, the training there and to the area, and he breaks down and says, just a real, I'd say a telling comment about how hot it is. And here's the actual clip from the movie.
Boy, it's hot. This is hot. Never got this hot in Brooklyn. This is like Africa hot. Tarzan couldn't take this kind of hot.
And that is the God's honest truth. Tarzan didn't get this hot. Africa hot. That's what we deal with here in South Carolina. Or at least what I feel like anyway. And, it's one of those things where, like, my wife, she loves to go to the beach, and Lord knows my son enjoys it as well. In June, why we go in June, I have no idea. The beach is still going to be there in September and October. We could go those parts of the year, but no, we have to go in June. And her family is always, they have a tradition of going at that point in the year, so I'm not going to change any hearts or minds with my complaints. But in being there at that point in time, it's really hot, and you have a lot of thunderstorms that roll through. So it's this mixture of just being sort of, you either have swamp ass by virtue of being hot, or you have swamp ass by virtue of having gotten in the rain. It's one or the other. And with me, when I go there, I don't mince words about anything. I get on the golf cart that we rent, and I ride around for the most part. I don't go to the pool. I don't go to the beach. I try to just stay in as much air conditioning as possible, because I don't like to be hot and sweaty. And it's gross to me. And I know there are some occasions where you can't avoid it. You just have to be out in it and be hot and be sweaty and be uncomfortable. But it just is awful to me. And I keep telling my wife, that we're going to eventually vacation somewhere cold, because there was one trip we made up to Asheville one time to visit the Biltmore Estates up there. And we wound up encountering snow. It was awesome because, let me rephrase. It was awesome in terms of being there. It was not awesome in terms of having to drive back, because we were in her little Ford Escort that she had at that point in time. And it was interesting getting down the mountain there, but it was still a fun trip, because guess what? It was cool. And it was nice, and we were able to walk around and not sweat to death, and just enjoy ourselves much more than we would have otherwise. Because we've been to Asheville and we've been to Biltmore when it is not cool, and that house as luxurious as it may have been back in the day, they did not have anything resembling central air conditioning when that house was built. So during the warmer months, it is stifling inside that building. And, it's very uncomfortable to me. So, it is what it is. We've seen Asheville in both sides of the coin. But I keep telling my wife, we're going to go somewhere cold to vacation. And we're eyeballing a trip or a cruise next year. Lord willing that the cruise industry actually is functional by that point in time. But we're eyeballing a cruise to Alaska next year. And I'm just overjoyed about the concept and the potential for that, because it's going to be in August. And it's going to be when it's still warm in most other parts of the world. Going to be nice and cool up there, though. I'm looking forward to that one for sure, because it's going to be very different. It's going to be right up my alley in terms of it being a nice, cool trip. Cool in terms of temperature, and cool in terms of it being an excellent experience there, hopefully, as well. So, but yeah, I'm just sick of it being hot. I'm sick of sweating all the time, is what it really is, because I carry around a handkerchief with me for the most part, but it's the handkerchief is always one of those dual purpose or multi-purpose things that I keep around, because it's typically used for blowing your nose or what have you. But by and large, mine these days is nothing more than a sweat rag. Really and truly, it is a sweat rag. And there have been times where I've carried around a towel, like a little hand towel type thing, because I knew I was going to be sweating that badly. I even, for a face covering here, for some of the places I go, I actually will use a bandana, because they're more comfortable to me than some of the face coverings that are out there. But I'll use a bandana, and sometimes if it's a bandana that I haven't used as a face covering, I'll even use that as a sweat rag. So it's a lot of different things that I have to look out for in terms of trying to keep comfortable and keep cool. Drink a lot of water, of course, and other cool beverages and whatnot. But it's just one of those things where you gotta be careful. You gotta be able to look out for yourself in terms of dealing with the heat. But I'm just sick of it. I am just plain ready for some cold weather. I wouldn't say that I'm ready for 3 feet of snow and ice, but maybe 3 or 4 inches of snow I could deal with. And of course, people say, "Oh, I'll take 3 or 4 inches." Oh, that's what she said. Yeah, right. Whatever. Ha ha. You're so funny. Ha ha ha. But just a couple inches of snow, just enough to go out there and be able to play with it. And I'm doing worse now in terms of making references to phallic objects, in terms of saying I'm going to play with my 3 or 4 inches. But you know what I mean. I just want to be able to enjoy some snow and do something other than sweat. So we'll see what the weather does as things progress throughout the remainder of the year. But I'm just hoping for no more thunderstorms, no more hurricanes, and no more sweaty. No more sweaty. All right, folks, one more segment on the program this week, and it is our good old faithful What's a Redbeard Drinking? So we'll see what we pull out of the old refrigerator here in a moment and see if it's going to quench my parched thirst. Be back in a few, folks. Stay tuned. folks. Welcome back. We're at that point in the show where I get to enjoy a beverage. I'm a little bit thirsty right now, so this will be a very welcome thing at this moment in time. I will say I'm a little intimidated by what's in front of me at this moment, however. I have had a lot of different alcohol, a lot of different spirits, a lot of different selections in my years as a fan of various adult beverages and whatnot. I will say this, and you may be surprised because of the fact that it seems as though this product is sort of a rite of passage for a lot of people. I have never, up until this point, to this day, to this moment, experienced a MD 2020 product. Which, everybody says it's Mad Dog 2020. It's not actually, it's a nickname. It doesn't actually stand for Mad Dog 2020. It actually stands for Mogan David, which is the actual producer, Mogan David. And this is something I actually looked up here prior to the segment here and wanted to learn more about these. Originally, the 2020 stood for 20 ounces at 20% alcohol. It had 20% ABV in these things at one point in time. I don't know what it is now. I'm trying to look at the label as I'm talking to you, and I don't see it on there. I'll try and look at some of the other reference material I have here in front of me. But we've got, I'll say this is a special one. We've got a unique thing here in that this is what they're calling the MD 2020 limited edition gold flavor, which apparently is pineapple. Now, if you don't know what MD 2020 is, I'm going to go and call it Mad Dog. It's a fortified wine. So this is actually wine. And it's in some way, shape, or form been flavored by whatever they're calling the profile to be. In this case, it seems to be pineapple. I'm not sure how you take wine and make it taste like pineapple, but we'll see here in a moment. It's kind of hard to find much of a description on this thing because if you go to the actual MD 2020 website, all they do is they talk about the various wines they have in very limited capacity. Let's see here. Do they even have anything on this one? They've got, like the graphics that say, okay, well, you've got 152 days at this point in time left to enjoy this particular one. But all the others, I think they have about 8 other varieties that are consistent in terms of their offerings. But looks like most of them are, just most of these listings on this website are very brief in terms of what they have on here. They have things like peaches and cream, strawberry kiwi, red grape wine, blue raspberry, banana red. I'm not sure why banana would be red, but orange jubilee, electric melon, and then dragon fruit as well. And now this one apparently is pineapple. So let's see if we can find a bit of a description here. This is I would say it'd be a full description of this, but this is something I found on a website called BusinessWire.com, where they're talking up the fact that MD 2020 is kicking the year 2020 into high gear with the new limited edition of MD 2020 Gold. Let's go through this here, see if we can find a bit more of a descriptor. This is a quote from one of their brand managers. The year 2020 only comes around once. Oh, no shit, Sherlock. So what better way to celebrate than with an MD 2020 limited edition flavor? Explained Kate Hart, MD 2020 senior brand manager. The limited edition gold joins the MD 2020 portfolio of flavored wine beverages such as orange jubilee, banana red, blue raspberry, and red grape. MD 2020 Gold is the first limited edition offering from the MD 2020 portfolio since the brand's inception. Is there anything else in here about this? Let's see. MD 2020 is an American wine beverage with juicy, luscious fruit flavors. Launched in 1984, the MD 2020 portfolio includes an array of flavors, and they've already discussed that. That's kind of a repeat there. Iconic MD 2020 brand stakes its claim to the year 2020 with the introduction of a special gold limited edition pineapple flavor. So we're not getting anything other than just this thing is flavored like pineapple. So it's wine flavored like pineapple. Okay. Let's just break into this thing. I don't want to beat around the bush with this too much because, again, I've never had one of these before, and I really want to see what it is. Let me look at this bottle, see if I can find the ABV on here anywhere. Hang on, bear with me for a second, folks. This is 13% ABV, so not 20% like the original name would have implied there. If this had been 20%, I don't think they could sell it in gas stations like where I got this from. But let's uncork this thing, or unscrew it. There's no cork, and we'll see what this thing actually has in terms of its aroma. Nice metal cap. Spared no expense, obviously. Come on, thing. This thing has threads longer than my arm. My goodness. Come on, thing. Get off of there. 3 hours later, I'm still unscrewing the cap. There we go. Finally got it off. Phew, boy. All right, let's give this a pour. This is a clear glass bottle, so there's no real, I guess, hiding what this looks like in terms of its color and whatnot. I'm not expecting anything as far as like head on this either, because it's wine. It's not carbonated in any way, shape, or form, or sparkling. So in terms of the presentation, it's kind of a milky off-white color. Looks kind of like a Smirnoff Ice in terms of the color. It's just that sort of milky, not quite opaque or translucent fluid sort of look to it. It's like if you had, a glass where you had a little bit of milk in it and then you poured water into it, and that's pretty much what this looks like. This is begging for some color or something here, because it looks almost like, it could be a watery pina colada as well, since we're talking about pineapple, although pineapple isn't really in pina colada. Oh man, this is kind of intimidating, as I said here, because this, again, is something I've never had before, and I'm not a particularly big wine fan. So let's put it to the nose and see what the aromatics give us on this particular offering. Well, it's very pineapple forward. I'm not getting much in the way of booze or whatnot in terms of an off-putting alcohol smell or a malt smell. The pineapple very forward, very upfront. Smelled pretty much like I was getting just straight almost pineapple juice. That's impressive. Which with a lot of wines, you do have an opportunity to have more of the aromatic experience being the source of whatever was involved in crafting that particular beverage. So let's put it in the nose again here and see if we pick up anything else. Has kind of a creaminess almost to it, which is interesting because, again, I made the comparison to sort of a pina colada there a moment ago. Again, very pineapple forward, so if you like pineapple, which I do, I happen to enjoy pineapple a great bit, this has got, I'll tell you, this has got promise here. So let's go ahead and put it to the lips and gums and see what happens with this. Again, this is the MD 2020 Gold Limited Edition Pineapple flavor. Wow. Well, it's not as pineapple forward in terms of the taste as what you would expect from the aroma that you get. It's not bad. Very smooth. For something that's 13%, this is not at all off-putting like what you experience from, say, like a malt beverage. This is very smooth in terms of drinkability. Not a whole lot of, again, pineapple flavor necessarily, but not a real punch in terms of the alcohol content either. So it's very smooth, not overpoweringly sweet, although it is plenty sweet. Trying to get a gauge on if it's pineapple enough for me to truly enjoy this, or if I could say it almost needs more pineapple. Let's give it another taste here and see if we get anything else from this opportunity. Hang on one moment. The pineapple is very subtle, I will say. And that's a bit surprising because in hearing the term MD 2020, Mad Dog 2020, you almost expect it to be in the same variety of punch you in the mouth type stuff is like, Four Loko or whatnot. And this really doesn't do that. It's not bad. Not bad at all. It's actually quite good. I could probably drink this whole thing here in one sitting. I mean, I may do that. But at the same time, it needs something else. Like if you could blend this maybe, or if you could just put it over ice, which I may do that here in a moment. I think it would benefit this tremendously, as it's missing something. There needs to be something else there in terms of fleshing out this flavor profile to say, hey, this is a full experience here in terms of replicating either pineapple or a pina colada or something. And maybe that's what I'm missing here is this. This feels like it's very akin to other things, but it's not close enough to them to say, hey, I'm this or I'm that. I'm somewhere in the middle and I'm lost. So maybe that's the problem here. Or maybe that's the problem with me. Regardless, this isn't bad. I would say this is about between 1 to 5. This is about a high 2.5, almost 3. I would drink this again. I would definitely have this as a beverage. As something that you could put over ice and enjoy for a nice little while there, or you can keep it cold in the freezer and just dip into it as you need there on a warm day or whatnot. But this is pretty good. This is, again, not something that I would say is a high class beverage by any stretch of the imagination. But for $3 from your local quick pantry or gas station, not bad at all. Not bad at all. I would definitely look to try some of the other flavors because I think they've got about 8 in their roster right now. This was number 9, and it's a limited edition variety, so I'm glad I had the opportunity to try that. Pretty good stuff there. So, about a high 2.5, somewhere between a 2.5 and a 3 there on the old scale for this edition of What's Redbeard Drinking. Folks, we appreciate you tuning in, being a part of the show. Thank you for hanging out with us here on the Rasslin Redbeard YouTube channel and listening to what we had to say here on this episode of the Weekly Trim. If you've enjoyed the program, please consider subscribing to the channel. Give us a like, give us a comment, give us a subscription. All that stuff us YouTubers are supposed to beg for. But for now, we're going to encourage you to wash your hands, wear your damn mask, wash your damn mask, and we'll see you on up the road.